DC's Legends of Tomorrow has already wrapped up its 6th season, and we're not going to have to wait long until the 7th season because it's only a month away. It's honestly kind of crazy how this year the Arrowverse seasons are kind of bleeding into each other so that we're not exactly getting a hiatus. Like at the moment we're at the biggest lull in shows, but even then we still have both Stargirl and Supergirl airing, so nothing's really changing. But I've never actually ranked the Legends of Tomorrow seasons, and in the case of my bottom 2 choices, I really do think I need to rewatch them because it's been a while. But before starting this ranking, I just want to ask if you can subscribe if you're not already. I make DC and Marvel videos every single week, and so new subscribers really do help to keep up the motivation to make new videos. But as always, I just want to preface this by saying that this is all my opinion. Legends is one of the most unique Arrowverse shows in that there are parts of the fandom or fanbase that each love a different part of the show. Some love the season 1 tone, some love how season 2 and season 3 blended serious with fun, some love the complete insanity of seasons 4 to 6, and some love it all. So again, this is just how I personally feel about the seasons, and there really is no right or wrong answer, but let's get into this. So in 6th place I have Season 4, and kind of par for the course with a lot of the DCTV shows, Season 4 is where some of the shows really stumbled. Arrow had by far its worst season at this point, Flash had its first bad season at this point, Black Lightning had its worst, which I know that one is a little controversial, but in the case of Legends, I think the show really did reach the bottom of the barrel with this season. This was the first time the show hugely attempted to distance itself from the core Arrowverse shows, and I wasn't really crazy about that. There were basically no cameos happening throughout the season, and also this was the first year where the show didn't take part in the yearly crossover. Besides this, it felt like the show really had decided that it didn't want to be a superhero show anymore, almost completely abandoning scenes where the characters would suit up, and this was also the first season where it really did feel like the writers wanted to prioritize comedy and see how crazy they could get, even if that meant the plot and the characters hugely suffered as a result. The seeds for this development were definitely planted in prior seasons, but it really did feel like so many of the people behind the show got replaced between seasons because this just felt like such a 180 from what the prior 3 seasons had established. And I completely get that there are parts of the fanbase that really do love the direction the show took in this season, but not gonna lie, it felt quite alienating as someone who was a huge fan of the show before season 4. It sort of felt like the writers were saying, the old show you liked doesn't exist anymore, we're something else now, you gotta get used to it. It also sort of felt like they were even slapping the face of the people who loved the old seasons by having one of the biggest villains on the show, who was Vandal Savage, have his first appearance in years only for him to be an absolute joke, and genuinely the opposite from what he was in season 1. Now I get that the show's whole thing now was that they took nothing serious, but at the expense of everything the show used to be, this was just frustrating as hell to watch. In 5th place, I have Season 5, which while I do think it's slightly better than Season 4, I still think that a lot of the issues with Season 4 are still very much prevalent in this season. It's just that the storyline in Season 5 and some of the one-off episodes feel a little better here than what we had in the previous season. I think the fact that Season 5 had some serious effects of what happened in Crisis, like with Sara and getting powers and being the paragon of destiny and all of that, all made me slightly more into this season than the prior one. I also really liked the final more than Season 4's as well, and the fact we got a proper superhero moment in the final for the first time in seasons really did leave a better taste in my mouth than almost the entirety of Season 4. Still though, in terms of Arrowverse seasons, I think Legends Season 5 is pretty damn low. In 4th place, I have the most recent season, Season 6. So Season 6 of Legends might be the most divided season I've seen in terms of Legends. I've seen a lot of people who absolutely love it and think it's a huge return to form for the show, and I've also seen a lot of people who hate it and think it's the worst season that the show has ever put out. I fall somewhere in the middle personally. I think a lot of the first half genuinely was a huge return for the show. It was the best Legends had been since Season 3 for me. I thought Bishop had the makings of a really good villain, and I thought that the way the story was heavily focusing on both Ava and Sara was also really well done. And for the first 8 episodes, it felt like the show was the most consistent and well written it had been in years. But then for some reason, after 8 episodes, they decided to just more or less abandon the main storyline in favour of telling a bunch of one-off stories, and then only really returning to that storyline when there were only 3 episodes left. It was all around really frustrating and made this a very uneven season for me. I felt like the first half could easily be up there with some of the best Legends has put out, while the second half is a lot of the same stuff we came to expect from seasons 4 and 5. It was disappointing honestly, and it didn't really leave me that excited for the show's 7th season. In 3rd place, I have the first season, and this is probably the season that I can see a lot of people argue about. Like, I feel like season 1 is that one season that everybody kind of places differently, or talks about differently, or feels differently on. My feelings on season 1 are that it was a very solid start to the show. It's easily the most unique season that Legends has had, in that it isn't like seasons 2 and 3, but it also isn't like seasons 4 to 6 either. I think that the characters are easily the weakest part of season 1, the Hawks being the biggest example of characters that a lot of fans just really did not like. Vandal Savage also is a very strange villain. He's kind of hard to describe, honestly, but a big reason why I still really enjoy this season is because it is a reminder of a different era for both Legends and the Arrowverse as a whole. It's very apparent when watching this season that the people behind it had some serious plans for the show's future. They were setting up the Thanagarians, they were likely planning on doing a lot of interesting things in the future with rogue time masters, and they also very clearly wanted space to be a big part of the show. Like, I think we could have seen the crew of the Wave Rider come up against aliens in other spaceships way before season 6 if season 1 ended up being the path for the whole show. I also love how connected to the wider Arrowverse this season was. The episode focused on Star City of 2046 is still a top tier Arrowverse episode for me. Seeing an old and grizzled Oliver with a younger Deathstroke and Connor Hawke was like nothing we'd seen in the Arrowverse to that point. It was so different to what we expected, and I also really thought this was what the show was always going to be, showing us future versions of characters, alternate timelines of characters, because it did feel like every single episode of season 1 featured at least one character from one of the other shows. It was nothing short of awesome, honestly. Unfortunately though, a lot of people really disliked this version of the show, and it ended up being a tiny piece of what an alternate Legends of Tomorrow could have been in its later seasons. I do think that if this was the tone the season stayed at, if they got slightly better writing and more interesting characters, it could have ended up being an absolute all-time great for comic book TV. In second place, I have season 3, and this is a season that I desperately do need to rewatch because it's been a long time, but I remember really enjoying this season for the most part. There are a few tiny things that kept this season from being number 1. One major thing are the villains. I feel like Malice and all of that sort of magical stuff surrounding him and the totems wasn't nearly as interesting as season 2's Legion of Doom. I also felt that this season sort of started the trend of seeing how wacky they could get with the additions of things like Giant Bebo. But besides that, the show had a lot going for it this season. Bringing in Kwasa and tons of elements from the Vixen animated show was a really inspired choice, and one thing that makes the Arrowverse feel a little bigger and more expansive. The show also took on Constantine for his first appearance since Arrow season 4, and he almost immediately fit in with Sara and the other legends. The show also had a mini arc with Wally involved, and it was one of the funnest mini crossovers the show had. It's a little sad that Wally didn't stick around, but in my opinion, Legends Season 3, in his limited time, utilised Wally far better than The Flash ever did. Besides this, the show also set up future seasons by bringing on Zari, Ava, Gary and the Time Bureau, and it really did feel like this season had enough of the prior seasons and enough of the later seasons. If the show had stayed in this kind of area for later seasons, I do think it would have easily had enough for every kind of fan to enjoy what the show was doing. And in first place, I have Legends of Tomorrow Season 2. So Legends' second season is not just the absolute perfect season of the show for me, but it's also one of my favourite seasons of TV ever made. I feel like the show was absolutely firing on all cylinders this year. They took the criticisms from people who didn't like Season 1, and so they brought on better characters, better villains, they made the tone of the show a little bit more fun and lighthearted, while also keeping the serious aspects there when needed. They didn't sacrifice character arcs and stakes so that they could make a quick joke, which is what a lot of the following seasons did. The show also didn't just have Arrowverse references for the sake of references, but for the first time, they made a proper effort to tie in with the current stories on both Flash and Arrow. We had the future Barry Allen voice message and Eobard running from Black Flash, all tying in with what Flash seasons 2 and 3 were dealing with. They brought in both Malcolm and Damian and explained how they were here after what transpired in Arrow season 4. Nowadays, if we're lucky enough to see an old character return, it isn't explained at all, or we get a random one-off line that may as well just be the writer saying they didn't think about it. Overall, Legends of Tomorrow Season 2 is by far what I wanted out of the show. This season made me so excited for where the show would go later on, and I'm just kind of sad that it didn't take more advantage of how everything was so good in this season. But again, all of this was just strictly my opinion. I know that Legends of Tomorrow is one of the few shows where a lot of people have completely different rankings or completely different opinions on the season, so if you disagree, that's completely fine. Let me know what your ranking is, and if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and all of that, and I hope you have a great day.